On a tour I was interested in the difference in the class system between the English and the New Netherlands. Now I understand the English class system is based on birth, and in the New Netherlands it was based on your income, on your financial status. And I was wondering, is that why today our class system seems to be based to a large extent on that?
Well, this is often given as the difference between New York and Boston, for example, where, and maybe Philadelphia as well, that there's more of a class system in these two cities than there is in New York. In New York, you have this feeling that you can lift yourself up by your bootstraps, or you can make it if you have the ability. You don't have to be from an upper class to get into the upper class. You can sort of make your way in, and this is a big difference. It's a gross generalization, naturally, but there is some truth to it. You look at the colonists who come over, the Schuyler's, for example, in the Albany area. They're very poor Rhine River boatmen originally, from a very low class, but they're able to marry well and work their way up in society, and he becomes a general in the revolution on the American side. In fact, he's the real winner of the Battle of Saratoga. I'll put a plug in for Schuyler, not Gates. But there's a difference because you have a big middle class in the Netherlands at that time, and in other countries you have a large upper class and a large poorer class. It's sort of like an hourglass as opposed to a bulge, to, let's say, an egg.
Yes,
and that's a difference.
There are definitely similarities, but that doesn't mean there is causality. And this is the big problem with generalizations on an issue like this. It's not because of the Dutch in the 17th century that things are different now. So many social developments have had their impact in the 18th century, in the 19th century. After the opening of the Erie Canal, New York City became the main entry port for the exploration and the winning of the West in many ways. That has had, in my view, a major impact on the systems, the social systems and the class systems of the city, that totally wiped away any remnants of Dutch influence. The whole process of modernization. History doesn't work that way. It isn't like it was like that in the 17th century. It's similar now, so there must be a causal link. It's much more complicated than that. And
we tend to extrapolate too much.
Yeah.
In your presentation, you mentioned the baptism of Negroes. How prevalent was African slavery in the early years? And at what point did the trafficking begin between Africa and this part of the world, if there was a lot of
it? The estimates are very difficult to make, but to my best estimates, there were about 100 blacks in New Netherlands in 1639. By early 1664, about 250, which would be in New Amsterdam, let's say between 7 and 12% of the population. The arrival of the ship Gideon in late August 1664 probably doubled the number of blacks in New Netherlands. So, but that's about the best we can do, and it's always difficult because any percentage is based upon an assessment of how many blacks there were and what the size of the entire population was, and both are difficult entities. So that's why I prefer to give a range. But there is no census, for instance. This is the pre-statistical age, so we have to deal with assessments.
You have to keep in mind that there's no labor-intensive activity in New York, as there is in Virginia and Maryland with the tobacco industry. Tobacco production is labor-intensive. Here, blacks worked on the waterfront. They were longshoremen. They probably cart drivers. They hauled stuff. They made repairs. But as Jaap showed in that document, when they had to produce when they needed labor for a capital construction, they called on everybody. Everybody turned out, and they performed their duty. Whether you were a servant or whether you were in the burger guard or whatever. So it's different than the way it's often portrayed.